Hi, this is Mike Peterson from Challenge Island, Oakland County East, back with our Steamtastic Friday. So we're in the middle of the summer season here for our Steamtastic Friday series, and right now we're going to talk about the A in STEAM and how that relates to summer. So A stands for art, and there's a lot of cool art that depicts things from the summer. For example, blue skies are great to draw pictures of in the summer. When you look at night, you get some really cool red sunsets. So we're going to talk a little bit about where those blue skies and red sunsets come from and how that's affected some pretty famous works of art through history. So before we do that, let's throw a little science in. So if you've ever wondered, why do you get a blue sky but you get a red sunset? What happens there is when the sunlight comes down to Earth, it hits little tiny particles in the sky in the atmosphere, so we call them atmospheric particles is the fancy word for it. When that happens, those sunbeams hit those and then it scatters the colors that are going on. So even though the sunlight looks like it's kind of white, because it's got all the colors mixed together, that starts to scatter them so that you only see some of the different colors, not all of the white that originally comes down. So when we do that, we get an effect that's called the Rayleigh scattering. So most of the time, most of the particles in the sky are really tiny. So if the sun's just going through a few of those, we end up down at this end. And that's why the sky looks blue most of the time, is because we're just seeing the blue pieces of that light. Now, if the particles get a little bigger, or if that sunlight has to go through a lot of different particles, then we start moving down here, and that's why we get yellow and orange and red colors. So for example, when the sun's going down, it has to go through a lot more particles because it's kind of at an angle as we're looking at it. That's why we get those darker colors. So let's go back to the art a little bit. So to do that, I want to tell you a story about a very famous volcano called Krakatoa. Now Krakatoa is located in Indonesia. So and Indonesia is in Asia. So if you recognize this part of the world on my map here, here's Africa, here's some of Asia. Indonesia is over 2,000 islands off the coast of Asia here. So Krakatoa is on one of those. So Krakatoa is a volcano that's been around for centuries and centuries. In fact, it's still blowing up right now. So sometimes we get smoke and we get ash and different things coming out. But back in 1883, there was a very famous explosion, a very famous volcano eruption that happened back then. So we don't have very good pictures of that. But if we look, here's a drawing of what happened back in those days from someone who was pretty close. So you can see there's a lot of smoke and ash that went up into the air when that explosion blew up. So this actually is credited, even though they didn't have a lot of scientific instruments back then, this made one of the loudest noises that ever happened in the world. So people over 3,000 miles away could hear this volcano blowing up because it was so powerful when it erupted. So one of the effects of that is it shot all this smoke and lava up into the air, a bunch of ash up into the air. So that created a lot of those particles like we talked about earlier with the Rayleigh effect, and it caused the whole world to see the sun a little bit differently for several years after that. So like we said, when we get those particles in the sky, we usually get like orangish and reddish kind of colors. Let me show you a painting that was done back in those days. This painting was done a few months after that volcano blew up. It was blown up pretty much all of the summer of 1883. This painting was done in London, England, which is almost halfway around the world from Krakatoa. But there was so much ash in the air, it actually made the sky, even there during the day, look bright red like this. So let me show you one more here. You might recognize this painting here. This is from a famous artist in Norway named Edvard Munch, and this is called The Scream. The reason they call it The Scream, if you look at this scary guy down here, it kind of looks like he's screaming. So we're not going to talk about that necessarily, but I want you to look very closely at this sky. So do you recognize the color of that sky? It's kind of a reddish color, isn't it? So when we look back in history, this was painted actually about 10 years after Krakatoa blew up. It was painted in Norway, which again was a long ways away from Indonesia. But when we look at the diary of Edvard Munch, he talked just the year before he painted this painting about still remembering how red and dark the sky was back in those days. And so we're pretty sure, since he was thinking about that, and then he painted this cool painting, we're pretty sure that's where that red came from, was because of all that ash in the sky turned it red, and that's why we have red skies in so many of the paintings from back in those days. All right, so speaking of art, when you get outside this summer, whenever it's nice out, check out all those amazing colors and all the different colors that you get in the sky. See if you can find some crayons and markers that duplicate those, and that could be a record for people 100 years from now who are wondering, hey, what was going on in the sky back then? All right, with that, thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.